Oh, goody, inflation. We have more of it. That's outstanding news. 4.9% year over year now. That makes it over 17.4% since Joe Biden took office. What's that mean to you? Well, you already know what it means. You buy groceries, you buy gas, eggs up 21, pet food 14, bread 12. I could go down the list. Everything in your life's more expensive. There, I simplified it for you. It's friggin' awful. When's it gonna stop? What can we do about it? I don't know. I bet Peter does, though. Peter Schiff joins us now, chief economist and global strategist at Euro Pacific Asset Management. Okay, Peter, 4.9% sucks. It's not obviously not ideal. I don't like being 4.9% poorer than I was yesterday, but it's better than 8. Are we getting better?
Well, I guess it's not quite as bad as it was, but it's not good. I mean, if you thought prices were high before, they just went up another 4.9% from where they were a year ago. And that was up a lot from where they were a year before that. But of course, these government measures are not honest. You basically have to double the official numbers to get a better idea of what's actually happening to prices. So if the government says they're up 4.9%, they're probably up closer to 9.8%. That is a better read on what Americans are struggling with.
Peter, can you explain that part of it before we move on to anything else? Because I know they lie. It's the government. Of course they lie. They lie about everything. How do they manipulate the numbers to make that number look better than it actually is?
Well, they don't have to manipulate it. The CPI was designed to manipulate it. So there's a formula. They don't just have a fixed basket of goods and just compare the price now to the price a month ago or a year ago. That's what they used to do in the 1970s. They don't do that anymore. They tinker with the basket. So the methodology for calculating the CPI has been designed to produce a lower number than what we used to get when we had a more honest measure of prices. So that's by design. The government doesn't have to lie. The CPI does it for them.
Oh, okay. Now, interest rates. Now, I understand we have the ultimate devil's bargain here. You can have high interest rates or you can have high inflation. I get it. What's the Fed going to do now facing 4.9%? Does this make them stop rates? Do rates keep going up? What do you predict?
Well, actually, we have both. We're going to have high interest rates and high inflation. And,
good.
Because interest rates are prices. It's the price you pay when you borrow money. The price is going up, just like the price of everything else. And in fact, interest expense is a major part of every business. You have labor costs, you have raw material costs, you have rent, and then you have interest. And as interest goes up, well, that's just another cost that you need to pass on to your customers through higher prices. So it's a self-perpetuating spiral. What we really need to attack inflation is lower government spending. Government needs to cut spending, but that's not happening. In fact, they're doing the opposite. Under Biden, the government is increasing spending, so they are throwing gasoline on an inflation fire.
Okay, Peter, how does this end in anything else but a disaster? Because I know what you say is true. They're still printing it. They're still spending it. We're doing everything possible to make it worse. Where does this buck stop?
Yeah, in a disaster. That's the only way it will end, because as long as there is no disaster, we'll keep kicking the can down the road until one happens. And the disaster that's coming, I think, is going to be a sovereign debt and currency crisis. So much worse than just the garden variety financial crisis we had in 2008, because this time it's not just going to be subprime mortgages that are the problem. It's going to be U.S. Treasury debt. That's the problem. Nobody is going to want to own our sovereign debt because of how high inflation is. And that's also going to create a dollar crisis. And so this is where we're headed, and it is a big disaster. Everybody wants to pretend that we're going to have a crisis if we don't raise the debt ceiling. No, we're going to have a crisis because we do raise the debt ceiling, because we've continued to raise that debt ceiling rather than dealing with the real problem, which is not the ceiling, but the debt. The ceiling would be the solution to the problem if they only stopped raising it.
Can you explain what that looks like as best you can for the average American? Okay, what does it mean when countries stop wanting to buy up our debt? What does that mean for me? I'm just a normal idiot. I buy groceries and hang out with my kids on the weekend. What does it mean for me?
Well, the reason that Americans continue to enjoy a higher standard of living than what we would normally be awarded based on our collective productivity is because of the dollar's role as the reserve currency and because our trading partners are willing to accept the dollars we print for the goods that they produce. And they're willing to hold on to those dollars by loaning them back to us, by buying our treasury debt or mortgage-backed securities or other debt instruments. So we basically get to buy stuff for lower prices and then borrow money at lower interest rates. Now, if the world stops wanting to accept our dollars because they no longer have confidence in the dollar's future purchasing power, in the exchange rate of the dollar versus their own currency, then what that immediately means is prices of everything that we want to buy go way up, and the cost of borrowing money goes way up. So Americans see their standard of living go way down because if the prices of everything goes up, they can't afford to buy anymore. So now a lot of the things that we take for granted, we can no longer afford. And to the extent that we need to borrow money, we can't afford that either. So the entire economy just collapses, and that is the disaster that we are heading for.
Peter, that sounds like a Great Depression or worse to me.
Yeah, it's probably going to be worse. But yeah, I mean, I think it is a depression. But unlike the depression of the 1930s, where people at least got the benefit of falling prices, that provided some relief. During the depression, you lost your job, but at least the cost of living went down. And if you didn't lose your job, you were actually better off because you had your paycheck and your paycheck went further because consumer prices fell during the 1930s. But this time, even the people who don't lose their jobs are going to suffer because they're going to lose the value of their paychecks. They're going to lose the value of their savings because everything that you need to buy is going to be a lot more expensive. And that's going to compound the burden for the unemployed because not only are they going to be without jobs, but their savings are going to be destroyed. And even if they get checks from the government, it's not going to be enough to afford the basic necessities.
Why can't these people see this coming? It seems so obvious to me when you print money like this. China, they're already moving with the BRICS as far as the reserve currency goes. Brazil and China have already moved off of the reserve. Why can't they see this coming? I'm a moron and I can see it coming. Why don't they do something?
Well, they never see any disasters coming, or if they do, they lie about it. They don't want to admit it. I mean, why couldn't they see 2008 coming? That was obvious. Why couldn't they see this inflation problem? I mean, they were claiming it was transitory when it was obvious that it wasn't. So it's all about spin when it comes to the government. They're never going to be honest. They're either going to lie about what's going to happen, or maybe they're just so ignorant that they really can't see what is clearly apparent to anybody who objectively looks at the facts. So you've got to think for yourself and recognize that the government is never going to tell you about a crisis. You just need to prepare for it yourself.
Jeez. Peter, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Take care.
I have great news. If you enjoyed that, I have a YouTube channel you can subscribe to. Whatever I do, it'll be right there on YouTube. So go subscribe today.